You don't realize how loud silence is until the power dies in winter and your house slowly starts turning into a freezer you're trapped inside. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. Modern homes aren't built to survive without electricity. They're built to assume comfort will always be there. And when the grid drops, your biggest enemy isn't the cold outside. It's the invisible physics inside your walls, stealing heat faster than your body can make it. That's where an emergency wood stove stops being a cozy aesthetic and becomes a survival machine. But only if you understand what it's actually doing. You're not just burning wood, you're turning chemical energy into radiant heat, convection currents, and breathable air management all at once. And if you ignore one of those pieces, the stove turns from life-saving into dangerous faster than you think. Most people imagine a wood stove as a metal box that makes fire. But the real survival advantage is thermal mass and controlled airflow. When you burn wood efficiently, you're forcing volatile gases to ignite instead of escaping as smoke, which means more heat stays in your room instead of leaving through a chimney like your hopes during a blackout. A properly designed emergency setup traps heat low and radiates it slowly, which matters because warm air rises and escapes through ceilings and cracks. If you place the stove in the wrong part of your house, you end up heating the attic while your feet stay numb. That's why survival manuals often emphasize positioning near the center of the living space or where heat can circulate through doorways, because you're trying to create a small, survivable climate zone rather than heat the entire house like you did when life was normal. Now listen carefully, because this is where physics gets personal. Wood doesn't burn because it's wood. It burns because heat breaks it down into flammable gases, a process called pyrolysis. When you choke the airflow too much, those gases build up and create thick smoke and creosote, which is basically sticky fuel lining your chimney waiting for the worst possible moment. But if you give the fire too much oxygen, you burn through your fuel like a panic spender during a crisis. The survival sweet spot is a slow secondary burn, where flames look steady, almost lazy, because that means the stove is extracting maximum heat from minimum wood. Military cold weather training actually teaches fire discipline for this exact reason. Conserving fuel equals conserving life. And here's something you probably never thought about. Your emergency wood stove isn't just a heater. It's your kitchen, your water sterilizer, and your psychological anchor. The top plate can boil water, melt snow, or cook simple meals, which matters because calories and hydration drop fast in cold environments. But there's a deeper biological reason too. Warm food increases core temperature and reduces metabolic stress, meaning your body burns fewer calories just trying to stay alive. During long outages, that difference decides whether your stored food lasts a week or a month. People underestimate how much morale matters until they're sitting in a dark room with nothing but cold canned beans, and suddenly a pot of steaming soup feels like civilization coming back to life. You also need to understand airflow inside your house, because a fire consumes oxygen and produces carbon monoxide whether you respect it or not. An emergency stove works safely when there's a controlled intake of fresh air and a clear exhaust path. And that's why even in freezing weather you sometimes crack a window slightly, not to let cold in, but to keep invisible poison from building up. Carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin over 200 times stronger than oxygen, which means you won't feel it coming. You'll just feel tired, confused, and then nothing at all. The science here isn't dramatic, it's brutally simple chemistry, and survival always favors the people who respect invisible threats more than visible flames. Let's talk about fuel, because the biggest myth is that any wood will do. Wet wood steals heat from you before it ever warms your room, since energy is wasted evaporating moisture instead of heating air. Dense, hardwood burns longer because it stores more energy per volume, while softwood ignites quickly but disappears fast, which means a smart survivor mixes both. Softwood to start the fire, hardwood to sustain it overnight. The sound of a good burn is subtle, a steady crackle instead of aggressive roaring, and that sound tells you your stove is operating in the efficiency zone, where heat output matches fuel conservation. This section is based on practical field survival experience, rather than formal academic sources. But even a perfect fire won't save you if your house leaks heat like a broken thermos. And this is where most emergency plans fail. Heat escapes through windows, doors, and uninsulated floors. So the real strategy is shrinking your living space. You close off unused rooms, hang heavy blankets, build a smaller thermal envelope where the stove's heat concentrates. Soldiers in Arctic training do this instinctively, creating micro-environments rather than fighting the entire landscape. Because the human body only needs a small pocket of survivable temperature to function. Once you feel that smaller room warming up, you realize something powerful. You're not just surviving the cold, you're controlling it. There's also a psychological shift that happens when you rely on a wood stove during an emergency. The rhythm of feeding the fire becomes your clock when electronics fail, and that rhythm keeps you alert. You learn to read flame color, ash buildup, and the way heat radiates across the floor. A dull orange glow means steady heat, while sudden bright flames signal wasted fuel and unstable airflow. Over time, you stop guessing and start listening to the stove like it's alive, because in a way it is. It breathes through vents, eats through fuel, and answers you with warmth or silence depending on how you treat it. This section is based on practical field survival experience rather than formal academic sources. And here's the part nobody wants to hear. An emergency wood stove isn't just about comfort, it's about buying time. Time for rescue. Time for the grid to come back. Time for your body to keep functioning when outside conditions turn hostile. Fire turns stored sunlight inside wood into immediate survival energy, bridging the gap between civilization and wilderness. The people who make it through long blackouts aren't the ones with the biggest houses or the newest gadgets. They're the ones who understand heat as a system. Airflow, fuel, placement, and patience working together. So if you ever find yourself sitting in a silent house while winter presses against the walls, remember that a small controlled fire, built with intention, can turn fear into stability. Because in the end, survival isn't about fighting the cold, it's about learning how to build a tiny sun inside your home and keeping it alive long enough for the world to come back.